Have you ever bought something you dreamed about for years, only to feel nothing a few days later? Have you ever believed that just one more thing would finally make you happy, but the feeling never stayed? Why does life feel heavier the more we collect? And what if the secret to happiness is not in adding more, but in letting go? Today's story is about the power of simplicity. Stay with me until the end because this story may change the way you see your life. Once, in a busy town filled with noise, trade, and endless movement, there lived a man named Edward. Edward was not poor. In fact, many people considered him successful. He owned a large house filled with furniture, decorations, and things he had collected over the years. Shelves lined every wall. Boxes filled every corner. His wardrobe was full. His kitchen was crowded with utensils he barely used. At first, each item had brought him joy. A new chair, a new painting, a new set of dishes, a new gadget. Each time he bought something, he felt a small spark of happiness. But slowly, something strange happened. The spark became weaker. The joy lasted shorter. And the silence inside him grew louder. Every morning, Edward woke up and looked around his house. Instead of feeling proud, he felt overwhelmed. Too many things. Too many choices. Too much noise, even in silence. He spent hours cleaning, organizing, moving things from one place to another. But no matter how much he arranged, it never felt enough. It never felt peaceful. One evening, after a long and tiring day, Edward sat in his living room surrounded by all his possessions. And for the first time he asked himself honestly, why do I still feel empty? A few days later, while walking through the edge of town, Edward noticed a small wooden hut near a quiet field. It was simple. No decorations. No fence. Just a small space with a single window. Outside, an old man named Samuel was sitting on a wooden bench, watching the sunset. Samuel had very little. A small bag, a cup, a blanket. That was all. And yet, he looked peaceful. Not forced peace. Not temporary comfort. But a deep, quiet contentment. Edward approached him. How can you live like this? He asked. Samuel turned and smiled. Like what? With nothing, Edward said. Samuel looked around slowly. The sky, he said. The wind. The sound of birds. I don't see nothing. Edward frowned. That's not what I mean. You don't have things. No comfort. No security. Samuel chuckled softly. And you have all those things. Are you comfortable? Edward didn't answer, because he knew the truth. Samuel stood up slowly. Come, he said. Walk with me tomorrow. Edward hesitated. But something in Samuel's calm presence made him agree. The next morning they began walking. Edward carried a bag filled with water, snacks, and extra clothes. Samuel carried nothing. After an hour, Edward's shoulders began to ache. Why didn't you bring anything? Edward asked. Samuel smiled. I bring only what I need. They walked through a forest path. The air was fresh. Sunlight filtered through the leaves. Edward noticed something he hadn't in years. The sound of his own footsteps. The rhythm of his breath. At midday they stopped near a small stream. Samuel sat down and drank water from his hands. Edward pulled out a bottle, a cup, and a cloth. Samuel watched quietly, then said gently, Tell me which of these is necessary, and which is habit? Edward looked at his things. For the first time he couldn't answer. They continued their journey. As the day passed, Edward began to feel something unfamiliar. Without distractions, without noise, without constant consumption. His mind became quieter. His thoughts slowed down. That evening they sat on a hill and watched the sunset. No music, no conversation, just silence. And somehow, it felt full. Edward spoke softly. I don't understand. I have everything, yet I never feel this. Samuel nodded. Because you are always adding. Never allowing space. Edward looked confused. Samuel picked up a glass jar from his small hut the next day. He filled it completely with stones. Can I add more? He asked. No, Edward said. It's full. Samuel smiled. Your life is like this jar. He slowly removed some stones, then added water. Now the jar held more, but felt lighter. Things fill your life quickly, Samuel said. But simplicity creates space. Edward stayed with Samuel for several days. Each day he lived with less. He ate simple food. He woke with the sun. He slept under the stars. He spoke less. He noticed more. And something inside him began to change. He laughed more easily. He felt lighter. He needed less. One morning, Edward asked, Do I have to give up everything to feel this? Samuel shook his head. No. Simplicity is not about having nothing. It is about not being owned by what you have. Edward returned home after a week. He stood at the door of his house. For the first time, he didn't feel proud. He felt trapped. He walked inside slowly. He looked at every object and asked himself one simple question. Does this add peace or noise? One by one, he began to let go. Some things he gave away. Some he sold. Some he simply removed. At first it felt strange. Empty spaces appeared. Walls looked bare. Rooms felt quiet. But then, the quiet became peaceful. The space became freedom. His home became lighter. His mind became clearer. His heart became calmer. Edward didn't become poor. He still had what he needed. But now he chose carefully. He kept what mattered. He released what didn't. Months later, people visited his house and said, "It feels different here." Edward smiled. "It feels like home now." One day, a young man asked him, "What changed your life?" Edward paused, then said, "I stopped trying to fill my life and started creating space for it." So, my friend, let me ask you something. How much of what you own actually brings you peace? And how much simply fills space? We often believe that more will make us happy. More money, more things, more success. But sometimes, more is just more noise, more weight, more distraction. Simplicity is not loss. It is clarity. It is freedom. It is peace. When you remove what doesn't matter, you finally see what does. True wealth is not measured by how much you have. It is measured by how light you feel. So maybe the question is not, what else do I need? But rather, what can I let go of? Because the power of simplicity is this: when you have less to carry, you can finally walk freely. If this story spoke to you, take a quiet moment today. Look around your life, not with desire, but with awareness. And remember, you don't need more to feel complete. Sometimes, you just need less.